Hello, everybody, and I am so happy to be here with an old friend of mine. We're not going to get into how long we have been friends, but this is Tony Amato, who is an amazing editor who basically works helping writers sort of develop their craft. But I am not the one to explain this process, so instead, I'm going to ask you, Tony, to explain what you do.
Hey, Helen, thank you. Oh, I wish you would, but I'll take a stab at it. I work with primarily LGBT people, most of my clients. Everything from fiction, nonfiction, poetry, memoir, speculative fiction. I've just worked on 2 audio plays that I had a blast doing that. Anyone who's producing writing, right? Written art, written communication, academic writing, pretty much from soup to nuts. So if someone has an idea that they are want to develop and they are starting on the first draft, I'll do coaching and I'll do table work around that. Accountability, I call it nice ass kicking, getting you to get your pages done. Everything from that to doing revisions if you have a draft, to doing line edits for style if you've already done the draft and your revisions, to sending the thing out there in the world, getting it ready to be published. The only thing I don't do is I'm not a proofreader.
It's a lot.
So,
And
yeah,
proofreading is its own art form as far as I'm
it
concerned,
is.
but yeah.
I can copy edit. So I call it book husbanding because I had seen people talking about midwifing books, and I thought, well, that doesn't really fit. And and I don't know. I don't really think of people's writing as babies. So I got to think about animal husbandry,
Mhm.
and I got thinking about what it takes to kind of bring that kind of a living creature from birth to, being making wool or whatever that animal's doing. So I thought, well, book husbanding really works um, to cover that whole spectrum of the
Right.
different services where I might intersect with your project at any point along the spectrum.
Well, that's cool. So, do you think the average person comes to you like, do you have any sense of like, do you mostly work with people who are working on a first draft, or mostly work with people who want the line edit? Is there any?
I think very evenly distributed across that, and it tends to come in waves. And I don't know if that's people get books done because they have summer break. I don't know what makes that pattern happen. Um, but at any given time, I probably have one or more clients who are in either of those or any of those. Last night, I just put together 9 query packets for a client, a fantasy writer for her fiction novel, and she'll take those 9 and go and upload them to Submittable. Right, so that's my work. Pretty much is done with her now because, of course, once you get an agent or an editor, they want revisions,
Right,
and my opinion doesn't matter anymore.
right. The people who
Although
will work
that's
with
not.
you get to win that argument. Yes.
But now, see, I just lied because I also work with Jesse Daniels, who
Mhm.
wrote Nice White Ladies. Uh, and her first book, Unforgivable. I actually worked in tandem with her agent
Mm,
on her draft with the agent's recommendations because she was having some difficulties trying to figure out how to satisfy what the agent was asking for.
sure.
So it really can be from, hey, I had this great idea, talk to me about how to structure a novel, to my agent wants me to cut 3,000 words and I have no idea how to do that.
Mm. Yeah, I think sometimes translating publishing speak for
Yep.
writers is also a thing.
And sometimes defending writers, right? I have my experience is that agents and editors, if you can articulate your choices, why you made them well enough, they'll back off and let you keep what they wanted you to change. But you have to be able to articulate it.
Yeah,
So I can help with that too.
right. So it really still feels like your book at the end, which is sometimes complicated. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's
so
where you go.
how long have you been doing this?
30 years.
Wow.
Yep.
And how did you start then 30 years ago?
Oh God, all roads lead to Dorothy Allison.
Well, they do.
They do. When I was very young in San Francisco, I was lucky enough to get to take some workshops and classes with Dorothy. And coming out of that, so I was 27 when I started really running workshops and working with other writers professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And by then I was in Vermont, and I started the very first workshop I did was for, we didn't have this word for them then, but was for sort of non-binary and other ways outside the expectations, homeschool kids. I ran a writing workshop
Wow.
for them. And then that ended up, a lot of their moms asked me to run a writing workshop for them. Yeah. And that I've got a history of that up on my website that talks more about the things I've done. But I started doing workshops, and then that sort of evolved kind of naturally to, hey, can you help me work on this piece that I was writing in workshop?
Sure.
And I've been really lucky, but I know what your next question is going to be, so I won't continue.
I was going to say, and the links will be below this video, so you'll be able to contact Tony and look at that story in particular. So, yes, and my next question, of course, is like, what's your like, the warm fuzzy, like, what's the satisfaction, or is there some story that you'd like to tell us about something that went right?
I'm gonna name published people, but I'm gonna make a disclaimer first. I always say I get to read all the best as yet published writing, right? Because publication can be such a game. I'm gonna name published people so that people watching this can go and find them. Right? But I really want to acknowledge there are dozens and dozens of novels and stories and memoirs and poems and microfictions I've worked on that haven't gotten published yet. And that's on the publication industry. That's not on and some stories I would tell I can't tell because of confidentiality. Right? But three writers actually, I've particularly struck by my work with them. One is a woman named Kristie Helms, who came out with a novel called Dish It Up Baby back in the early 2000s. Kristie had gotten through a lot to be able to write that book. And she came to me with all the blog posts that then were going to become that book. And the stack was as tall as me.
Wow.
And we went through that list of blog posts and curated it and found a narrative in it. And Dish It Up Baby got published by the reopened version of Cleis Press. So that was it's a story about a rural girl who moves to Manhattan and works at the Twin Towers. So it's like this country kid, her dreams come true, right? So it's a lot about class. There's a lot about being queer. And the main character was in a deadly abusive marriage. But this man started beating and raping this character the night of their marriage. And so it's an escape story. It's just beautiful. And very, queerness, domestic violence, class. So it was like, yes, I really love working on this. And then S.J. Sindhu, when their first novel, Marriage of a Thousand Lies, S.J. was a workshop member of mine. So classic example of working with someone soup to nuts, right? And when we were working on her novel, she was really stuck with trying to get the syntax and the sound. So we were past developmental. We were in what I call a style edit. And we were just stuck. Like we had the scene, it was all there, but it wasn't coming across right. It didn't have the emotional tone that we wanted. And Sindhu is Tamil. And as we were talking about arranged marriages and cultural marriages, they mentioned a dance form that was particular to Tamil culture and a musical form. And I said, oh, well, the rhythm of those sections has to be based on that very different from Western music you were just telling me about. And it all clicked in.
That's
So
awesome.
that's really satisfying when I can find another language a writer uses, whether they're musicians or athletes or scientists, and get them to see they already know how to do it. They just have to bring it over to their writing.
Hmm.
And it really is true, whether it's cooking or sex or politicking or whatever other thing you do and do well, you have the skills, you can translate that
Right.
to your writing. Um,
That's
and then
cool.
recently, Jesse Daniels, because Jesse Daniels does so much work fighting racism and talking particularly about white women and whiteness and all of that. And she just finished a memoir that I think is going to be really important and a game changer in this political scene we're in. So that's I always think the writers I work with are doing things that are going to change the world.
Yeah.
But when it that hands on, it's the pressure's high, but it's academic. So and I love wrestling with academic writing.
Do you?
I do,
Okay,
I do,
that's
I
a big
do.
admission, but all right. Yeah.
She just had an article published. It was 12,000 words,
Oof.
which is a lot for an academic journal, right?
Yeah.
And they wanted her to cut it by 3,000, and she couldn't do it
Oof.
because not many authors can go in and slash and burn their own work like that.
No.
So she
No,
gave me a
that's a
shout out, and
that's a
actually
skill.
she said I took a flamethrower to it, which I'm not sure is going to bring me clients. So maybe maybe if I explain it here, it will. One other thing, when you're not the writer, it's a lot easier to go in and
Mhm.
be ruthless, but still keep the heart of the thing.
Understand what's working and what isn't. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I just in teaching writing, it's I always have students who are like, "You cut my whole first paragraph," and I was like, "Yeah, that I cut my own first paragraph most of the time too." So that's how you're kind of getting ready to
Yeah.
actually do the writing. You're just letting it. So yes, I always
It's it's hard.
outraged by that.
Well, I think it's hard for a lot of writers when you're in your fifth or sixth draft. You can't see it anymore.
No, no, you can barely remember it really.
Right.
I mean, the process of writing is so different from the process of editing. I felt very lucky in my own writing to like be able to have times of day, when I
Right.
woke up and when I was doing the writing and when I was doing the editing and the organizing, right, which is a different brain than
Well,
the writing itself. So,
I'm really glad you said that because the other piece of what I do that's harder to talk about with the husbanding is coaching, and really trying to individually work with each writer to figure out what do you need to succeed as a writer. And it's never as simple as put your ass in the chair, and it's never as simple as doing morning pages, right? It's really individual to each writer, especially queer writers. There's a lot we're up against. There's a lot that matters, and you have to address those things to help someone be able to sit down and write.
yeah, I think the confidence or lack of confidence that writers experience is so much based on their own identities and their own lives, right? I mean, it's their class stuff and their yeah, all of the identity axes that we talk about all the time, but this notion of going, oh, and that's, I mean, I will personally certify, right? Tony's really good at like zeroing in on like, here's your bullshit. So I'm just gonna say that
I'm
that is my
nicer than that. I'm nicer than that.
you don't speak in Brooklyn, but yeah, basically, here's the stuff you should be looking at in order to get this project
I,
completed. Is
I,
that
I try
close?
to frame it. I try to frame it. Consider.
Right. Here's your bullshit.
Well,
That's my version, which is why people don't do this with me and why Tony's
well,
so good at it. So,
well, I'll tell you what. Though part of the reason I've changed my language a bit is because I realize people who don't know me often are now coming into a relationship with, for all that they know, a older white male editor.
oh, oh, yeah,
Right.
right.
So all of a sudden, you know, woman identified or like coming out of feminist writers who don't know me from Adam, I'm like,
Yeah,
well,
right. That's fascinating.
it's a little different.
Yeah, passing is weird, right?
Very
So we
strange.
always gonna be. It's like, no, but I have this 30 years. I mean, Dorothy Allison, when Dorothy Allison is the start of your journey, pretty much implies queerness, but yeah, fair enough. I feel like
Yeah.
she'd appreciate that statement. So yeah. Well, thank you so much. And again, I'm gonna say that just I really highly recommend Tony. I think he's amazing. And if you are that writer, especially as a queer writer, because I think there's always a discomfort with people who do this work who are straight, who don't understand queer writers or our narratives or our fiction or our poetry. And so having somebody who is so deeply enmeshed in bringing out our best and enjoying it as well, it's just, yeah, it's a gift. So thank you, friend.
Thank you. Way off. Click.